Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the Melanin Margin. We're your hosts, Quaviondre Williams.
And Daquon Wilson.
And this is the talk show dedicated to bringing the marginalized to the spotlight and uplifting the Black voices that will no longer stay silent. So let's get into this week's conversation. It's the thing that is guaranteed to happen to every living thing on Earth, yet it's barely talked about in society until it's too late. Today, we are talking about death. Daquon, I wanted to ask you, how does your family discuss death, or do they discuss it at all?
I'm going to be honest, I can't really think of any conversation that me and my family have had about death, other than maybe like after a funeral or something,
Mm-hmm.
oh, they went to a better place and all that stuff. But
Mm-hmm.
it's not really a big topic of conversation within my family, especially like, oh, like what happens to you when you die? What do you do
Mm-hmm.
before death? What happens to you after death? Because, of course, like my family is very religious. So it's one of those conversations that hasn't really been had that often.
Yeah, I think that that's kind of the same here on my side too. My family is not really big on discussing it. I don't think it's ever, like you said, it's the same thing with me. Like it's never really been discussed unless someone has died. It's never really happened that close to home. I think it's also one of those things where it's like death, even especially in the Black community, I think it's just one of those things where it's like it's a scary thing to discuss, which I don't really know why. Because growing up, I never had someone close to me die. Like I knew what death was, obviously, but there was never really any conversation about, what that would mean when someone it like emotionally I was never really prepared for it when it actually happened to me for the first time. Like my first interaction with death was with my grandmother, and she had passed away, and like when my mom told me that she died, it was one of those things where it's like, so it was real, but it wasn't at the same time. It was one of those things
Mhm.
where it's like I knew that she was gone, but I didn't really understand what that meant. And I think that was also because it's just not something that's, mom and dad don't ever tell you that, we're not gonna be here forever. You know what I mean? It's like it's just one of those things that's kind of like it's a very touchy subject, I would say.
Yeah, I agree. And I think that, like, similarly, I didn't have too many encounters with death of somebody close to me. Like I've had, grandparents passing away when I was younger, but I was never really especially close with my extended family and especially like being a little bit away and like
Yeah.
only really coming to see them like once a year. It was never really a big thing for me, at least in that moment. And it was something where like I was sad, but it was more like I understood that this is a time to be sad, so I'm kind of forcing myself to be sad. But it
Mm-hmm.
really wasn't until college that I had to really grapple with death in terms of, my one of my greatest mentors, our teacher, Mrs. James, passing
Yeah.
away. And that was something where like it came out of nowhere, where I was
Mm-hmm.
just like, I remember getting the call like somewhere at the dining hall and like right before my astronomy lab, and it was just like I stepped away from like my friends, was like, "Hey, I'm just going to like go really quickly and, print something out before lab." And like I went into a bathroom and I cried. And
Yeah.
like I didn't understand how to deal with somebody that's meant a lot to you and did a lot for you
Yeah.
dying. And so like I think that's why it's so important that we have conversations about death, because like honestly, that rocked me for a bit. And like
Mm-hmm.
when death happens, we're going to get to grief and everything, but like
Mm-hmm.
it's perfectly fine to grieve and go through all of that. But having at least something in your mind being like, this is a possibility, and like here are resources for you, and just like this is how uh, you grapple with death happening to somebody close to you, somebody that you care about.
Yeah, it's crazy because it's one of those. The craziest part is, as much as we all know that it's something it's gonna happen, it
Right.
always catches you by surprise. Every single time it happens, you're always like, no, 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 like, that's not. That's not what happened. And like, you know, when you think about that, like I said, growing up, I think that that's something that really needs to be discussed in the home. Like really kind of letting people know, like, you know, this is something that's it can be scary, and it can be, you know, very damaging and hard, and, you know, painful, but it's one of those things that needs to be talked about because, you know, growing up, you want to make sure that your children have the best tools possible to fully process what that means. And like I said, we'll get into grief later on in the episode too. And I want to talk, I'll touch back on this, but like there is something to be said about understanding the different degrees of processing and understand how different people process and giving people the room to do that in the way they need to. And so, like I said, we'll get to that later, but I wanted to ask you, like, are there ever conversations, even if it's not just about death, but like about how people in your family want to be prepared, like when they die, like your mom or your dad or whatever, like, you know, do they have anything like like a living will or some kind of life support addendum that they tell you about, like, hey, if this ever happens, X, Y, and Z?
To my knowledge, no. Like I've never really had
Daquon.
that conversation. I've never really had that conversation with my parents, and it's been something that I do think that that's also another reason why it's so important to have conversations around death, because
Mhm.
there's so many different logistical factors. Like if somebody dies, like, do they want to be cremated? Do they want to be
Exactly.
buried? Is there a
Yeah.
particular place they want to be buried? And like, that's something I don't know. Like,
Mhm.
and even just like, you know, I think a lot of times, especially in the Black community, wills are not a thing. Like, so many times,
No.
and it comes from just like such a long history of being oppressed and honestly not having anything to pass down, because
Mhm.
when you're, you know, scraping by to survive and, you know, you're
Exactly.
living paycheck to paycheck, you don't have any type of equity or assets or
Mhm.
anything like that,
Mhm.
you don't have anything to pass down. So what's the point of, you know, drafting up a will? But I think that it's so important in order to have things like a will, have things like life insurance and everything like that, because we live in a capitalist society. Death costs. Death is
Exactly.
expensive. Like, you would not believe how expensive it is simply to
To die.
bury somebody, to die. Like, it is something that everybody goes through, yet it's still so expensive, which is crazy that we have to pay money in order to celebrate the lives of our loved ones who passed.
Or not just that, about how opportunistic funeral directors and people are. And not, once again, it's an industry, we understand that, and I'm not saying that there's not people out there who genuinely care, but let's be real, let's call a spade. Like when it comes to life and it comes to, you know, those kind of situations, there are people who genuinely are like, don't you want your mother to be in a nice casket? Don't you want her to be, you know, comfortable, you know, whatever? And I'm like, bitch, she's dead.
She can't
Comfortable wear.
feel.
It's made with premium cotton and satin leather. Bitch, she's dead. They dead. And I mean, I hate to say it like that, you know, so bluntly,
Yeah.
but it'd be like, and that's why I made it. For me, I was recently, I lost two really people who were in my life. Both of my aunts passed away within like a month or two of each other this year during 20 during the year 2021. And it really rocked everything, the foundation of things that I knew. Like, cause my mom, it was my mom's sister, one of them, and it was my uncle's wife. And you know, their deaths were, I mean, again, shocking. Because it just was not something that either one, like nobody was prepared for. Because of course, even when people are like life, all these other things like that, you know, you never. It's like I said before, it's always surprising every single time it happens. But these specifically, both of them passed away, and it was such a it was one of those things where it's like, you know, when someone's a certain age, you kind of like know, okay, it might be any day now kind of thing. But it's like these
Mhm.
people, like my aunt was in her late, I think early, about to be in her early late 30s. My other aunt was in her late 30s, early about to be 40s or whatever. So like it's just one of those things you just don't expect it. And I think that one of the things that I made so clear, I sat down with my mom one day and my sister, and I was like, we need to talk about this. And as uncomfortable as it is, we have to, because I don't want to go through what my cousins went through when their mom passed away. You know, I mean, of course, you're already dealing with a magnitude of pain. magnitude of pain of losing someone that close to you, especially your mother, depending on the relationship y'all have. And I think that it's one of those things that really forced me to say, Mom, I need to talk to you. Like, we need to have this conversation immediately, because I don't want to be caught by surprise. Because a lot of the things I was noticing, especially when I looked at some of the other situations with my aunt and their families or whatever, like, there was so much that everybody knew that my aunt didn't want, that they were doing anyway. And again, because there was nobody with a living trust or some kind of knowing what that person wants, like, they kept her on life support way longer than she wanted to be on it for. They did other things. Like, there was just so many things, just compounding things, because it was just out of nowhere. And there was nothing in place to make sure that this was done, this was taken care of, this person knew this, that person knew that, you know what I'm saying? Just nothing at all. And it was one of those things that really made me go, Mom, I need to know, if you're in this situation, what do you want me to do? If this ever happens to you, how long do you want to be on life support for? If you're, whatever, if you're doing this, you're doing that. Like, I really was like very adamant about, like, my mom was like nervous about it, because she was like, I don't really, feel comfortable. I'm like, Mom, I understand. But if we have this conversation now, we don't have to worry about having this conversation. And I also have the conversation about me, because a lot of people don't talk about yourself and what you want. And like, I think that was something I had to discuss with my family and my sister, because I'm like, just because I'm younger than, just because it's supposed to go mom, oldest sibling, youngest, whatever, it's supposed to go in a certain order. That's not how our life always works. Anybody can die at any time. And you want to have some idea. And I'm not saying you need to ask your 16-year-old how they want to be prepared or whatever the case may be. But like, when you reach a certain age, like when you become an adult and, you're living in a real life, you're living in your, day to day, it is important to have that conversation, to say, listen, if I die today or tomorrow, whatever the case may be, I want to be cremated, I want to be buried, I want to be here, I want to be that, I want to this and the fourth. If make sure you get this stuff from this place and this stuff from that place, all that stuff like that. And I think also too, there's also another latest conversation, because a lot of families don't really discuss life insurance policies at all. Like, I want to ask you, Daquon, do you know about your parents' life insurance policies?
No. Like, they probably have one. They might have.
Daquon. I guess they might have one. I don't.
I mean, probably have something. I don't know. I am terrible for this conversation, because it's just like. But I think that's a reality for so many people, and I think, like, if you're watching and you get one thing, like, you're probably in a place like me where it's like, I don't really know if they have life insurance, or if they do, where it's from. Like, is it from like my dad's employer? Like, is it from like he was in the military? So is it veteran benefits, stuff like that? And, I think like hearing this conversation is a realization that, like, have that conversation to figure it out. But as of now, I have no clue.
Yeah, and that's another thing that people don't understand, is that that's the secret that white people don't tell people, is that they have these conversations. That is how they create generational wealth. Because a lot of these people that I've noticed will pull out, they will have these $1 million life insurance policies, or sometimes hundreds of $1,000 life insurance policies. And like, imagine, someone, it doesn't take that much. It is expensive to bury somebody, but if you got about a couple $100,000 in the bank account, you can get it done in a nice way, and still have plenty of money left over to be able to take that time you need. And I think there's so many things that we don't really understand, is that I didn't realize that. I was watching this video a long while back. I don't know what it was, but they were like, the reason why a lot of white people have such, why white people are statistically more likely, of course, obviously racism and stuff like that, and white supremacy. But one of the ways that they promote and continue to generate wealth in generational wealth and having their families and children taken care of, is because they tell their children, hey, these are my policies. They don't let them lapse. They make sure it's always paid up for the year or throughout the year, whatever the case may be. So should anything happen to them within that time, that money is automatically given to them. Because it's so crazy how even just 1 month lasts. If your parent or whatever person dies within that month that it lapsed, you can't get a motherfucking thing. And all that money is gone. Ridiculous. And it's crazy because so many people just don't take it seriously. And I think that's such a problem. It's so problematic, because that's how people are put into so much debt sometimes, because they're trying to figure out ways to bury their mom or dad or sister or brother or whoever, whatever, because there's nothing in place to say, if I die today or tomorrow, these are the people you contact, these are the people you get to, this is how you get the money. You know what I mean? And it's like, of course, it's not about money, but even something as small as a little bit of help to say, I can take off of work for at least a month, or I could take off for a couple months because my mom left me with a life insurance policy of over $500,000. So I can use 10,000 or 20,000 to bury her, and that other whatever a couple hundred thousand is in the bank account to be able to help me process what I'm going through, you know?
Yeah, exactly. And I also think that I think death is so mystified in the Black community, in the sense that a lot of these processes are brought into so many different conversations. Like, for
Yeah.
example, like if you died and you want to be an organ donor, I know so many people that are like, oh, I'm not going to sign up to be an organ donor because if
Mm-hmm.
I'm like barely living, they're just going to kill me to get my organs. Or they don't want to take out life insurance policies because if they feel like if they get a policy, then the insurance companies are going to be like, well, they already paid me, so let them die. Or there's all of these different
Yeah.
conversations of like mystifying everything that goes into the process of dying and, dealing with a loved one who died, that we don't talk about it. And therefore, it's so many different, I don't know the validity of any of those stories or whatever. I'm not going to say, but I think that it's one of those reasons why we don't have this conversation, is that we
Yeah.
have all of these different beliefs already in place.
Yeah, and I think it's just to me it's one of those things where it's like it is incredibly dangerous because there's so much stress that people go through, and the last thing you're going to be worried about when someone dies is how you're going to bury them and how you're going to take the time to do the processing you need to do when someone passes away. So if you are watching this video and you are happen upon this podcast episode, please have these conversations with your parents. Please talk to them about this kind of stuff just to be aware and to know what
And we're
needs to
not
be
just
done.
your parents.
Oh,
Have this
yes,
conversation with yourself of like
exactly.
you getting your own life insurance policy, you getting your own will, you getting all of these things for you, for your siblings, for your cousins, for your best friend, whoever.
Yeah.
Amen. On that note. But I do think that one more thing that I did want to say about this is that it's so important for us to always remember that death strikes when you least expect it. And I
Mm-hmm.
think that living in a pandemic, nobody was expecting a pandemic. And I think that everything that has happened during this pandemic should also be talked about in these conversations, because there can be some differences based off of how you die, in terms of like, any type of conditions that you had before you died, or
Mm-hmm.
any type of thing that happened. Because I'm sure there may be a difference between if you died of pneumonia or something like that, or complications like that, versus you dying in something like a car accident. And like,
Mm-hmm.
maybe you want to have an open casket funeral, but if your body is dismembered, do you want to have one? So I think that also understanding different context and
Yeah,
having those in place to continue these conversations.
exactly.
Now, losing someone you love is a life-altering experience, but many people never really discuss how losing someone can continue to affect your life even after they're gone. So, Andre, I wanted to ask you, how has your family dealt with grief? Is it handled in a healthy way, like going to therapy, or is it just pushed away?
Not at all. It's fully not. It is fully not healthy at all. There was so many things. I will say, and that's honestly, I think in a lot of Black households, it's really not. It is not handled in a way that constitutes healing. What I've realized, especially when my grandmother passed away, is that my mom struggled hard with losing her because that was her mother. And
Mhm.
what I noticed with her was that there was big decisions being made, like we moved to Augusta, out of from Columbia, just completely uprooted life kind of thing, because it just was like my mom wanted, I just need somewhere to go. And they tell you oftentimes too, don't make any big changes when you move, when someone dies, because you might just be doing it to kind of escape your grief and all kinds of like that. There are just so many different ways. And I've seen in certain family members, when they've lost someone, and the grief and how they processed it was not at all done in a healthy way. And this is again going back to that life insurance situation, because like, had some of those life insurance policies been in place, had my grandmother had one, had somebody else had one, had these things happened, maybe it would have been something that could have been done. Going to therapy to say, all right, we're hurting right now, and we all need to be able to process this real quick. So we need to go ahead and well, not real quick, but you know what I mean. Like we need to go ahead and process this as soon as possible. So we need to go ahead and go to these therapists. But the problem is we talked about this in the episodes before, but mental illness and mental health is like, not really taken seriously in the industry and in life. So, especially with life, what is it? Health insurance, it's not oftentimes covered. So grief counseling is one of those things, but it costs, like, who's going to spend, why would you spend $200, $300, $400 a session when you could just, deal with it yourself? And a lot of times, especially in the Black community, that's where a lot of that trauma comes from, because it lets a lot of unprocessed pain from people being lost. And I think that even to this day, people are still grieving certain things, but they are certain family members that they haven't fully understood that it is grief, because they never got a chance to take a pause and take a breather. That's what the fuck those insurance policies are for. It's for you to be able to say, I'm not coming to work for the next month or two, and you don't have to pay me because I have the money to do so. You know what I'm saying? You know what I mean? Like, that's what that's for. That's genuinely what that money is for. It's for you to take that time to say, all right, because imagine losing someone so close to you and then having to go back to work the next week because you can't afford to take off any more time. Or worse, what if it's someone that what if it's your husband or your wife or whatever the case may be, and y'all paying bills together, and now you suddenly have to pay all the bills. And life doesn't stop just because somebody else's life does. You know what I mean? Right. And it's so crazy. It's so crazy because people don't really understand the gravity and the depth of how grief can not only fuck with your mind, but it can fuck with your decisions, how you move about your life, hell, how you even move about your work. And honestly and truly, people don't understand that this shit can affect every area, every corner of your life, especially if it goes unprocessed.
Oh, that is so important. And it's so important because, let's be honest, there's a lot of people that just think that an employer is going to understand grief. Like, I have worked at places where if you have like grief days, like based off of your contract that you have in your employer, from your employer, you get like 2 days, maybe a week.
Maybe.
And that is not enough time, not nearly enough time to process anything, let alone deal with the preparations that need to come with death. And so it's so important to have all of these systems in place beforehand, so you can be like, look, I am taking X, Y, and Z time off because this has happened. I need to deal with it. I'm not looking for paid days off. Like, I have what I have to survive.
Yeah.
I just need time to process. And that's something that's so important. But, kind of going back to the question, I don't think, anybody in my family goes to therapy. If they do, I've never heard about it, because there is that stigma of mental health in the Black community. And let's face it, mental health is expensive. So there's a difference between, you want to go to therapy, but especially if your family didn't have a life insurance policy, or, using some of that life insurance money to go to therapy, to have grief counseling. So it's one of those situations where, oppression just fucks you, to be blunt. Oppression just keeps on oppressing, where it's like, all right, you're already living paycheck to paycheck. Your family members died. You don't have time to, take off of work. You don't have time or the money to see a therapist. And that's where all of that debt comes in, because, you might need to take out loans or stuff like that, and really predatory processes. And so I think that it's so important, not only, to promote mental health, but also, if therapy is not an option, having a conversation with somebody about what are healthy ways to cope, having conversations to be like, hey, if this happens, like, I still want you to live your best life possible. Don't think that you need to move somewhere else to forget about me or do all of these things. Having these conversations to reassure people that things are going to be all right, and that there are healthy ways, and then starting those beforehand, starting to ingrain healthy habits beforehand, can be so important to deal with death in the future, deal with grief in the future.
Exactly. I think for me, especially when my grandmother passed away, I wanted to bring this up too. She had an open casket. And seeing her, and my mom was like, we need to go see, it, whatever the case may be. But I just, no. Like for me, when I saw my grandmother in that casket, it was just one of those kind of emotions where I was like, I don't ever want to experience that again. And my mom, I think she thought she was doing what was best for me to kind of help me go through whatever. But like, because it was like, you have to see this, and it's like, no, I can't. I can't do that. And the reason I say this is because, and I think there's another level of like listening to people, and listen to them when they say what they need. And it's kind of like, it was enough to know that she was dead. I didn't have to see her dead body. Do you know what I mean? And for me, it's one of those things where it was because the thing that really got me together with it was like, for me, when I see a dead body, the only thing I can think about is that whoever that person was is no longer that person. Whatever they were is not them anymore. This is not them. And seeing her body in the position that it was in, I was like, this is not my grandmother. This is just the body that was left behind. The spirit, the soul, or whatever you want to call it, of whatever she was, is gone now. And so I made it very clear. I was like, when I saw that, I was like, I never want to go to the funeral again. Never. I never want to go to the funeral again. If it's open casket, absolutely. There's no whatever. I'll pay my respects, but there's no going to a funeral because of that situation. And even that, it taught me like how much I don't want to be viewed when I'm dead. It's like, no, bitch, in the fucking fire, girl, dust my ass. Like, I'm gone. Like, bitch, I'm dead. And that's why I mean, I try to make it funny, but like, truth be told, I told myself, like, bitch, I'm dead. I'm dead. That's a body. That's not me. Whoever I was is gone. And so it's just one of those things where, like I said, in that grieving, it really was one of those, even now talking about it, it was such a hard memory to have in my mind. And I think that, like I said, as a family unit, it is just never discussed really as much because everybody's emotional and sad and stuff like that. Nobody really wants to really talk about it. And people are like, well, let's just move forward because life keeps going. But I think that there isn't enough room sometimes in the Black community to take that space to say, I'm not okay and that's all right.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Yeah, and I think that especially like in my family, like I said before, my family is religious. Like all of my uncles have some type of position in a church somewhere. Like my family runs deep in the church, and it's something that
I think just the way you said that, all of them something. They something in the church. They
something. Deacons, preachers, pastors, all of it. And I think that, it's one of those situations that when death happens, so many times people just go to prayer. They go to prayer. They're like, this is a hard time. We're going to pray for you, all of this different things. And, that's also why funerals are important for them because, you have the funerals in the church. You have your church service. You have all different types of sermons. Like, the only funeral I remember going to, there was just like 2 or 3 different sermons. And I was like, I don't know what's happening right now.
Exactly.
Because it was not explained to me. And so I think that having conversations to be like, hey, yes, religion is important to people. Respect that. But also, what are other things? Because if you are somebody that believes that, God will answer your prayers, I also need to tell you, if you read the Bible, you can't just pray and expect it to be solved. Like you
God's
still
not a
have
genie.
to put in that work. Like if you believe that God will bring a blessing into your life, that blessing could be healing hands. That blessing could be somebody else's voice to help you go through something. That blessing could be all of the people that are brought into your life. So you can't just pray and expect like, all right, he touches me and now I'm good. Like
now I'm done. Yeah, it's over now. I'm healed.
Yeah, he may be answering your prayer by bringing somebody else into your life or giving you that courage, that power, that privilege and opportunity to seek out help.
That's what people don't understand about God is that like God isn't a genie. Like he's not just blink and it's just magically you're okay. Like, no, if you really do believe in God and you really like understand him, you understand that God has created scientists and doctors and lawyers and people like that. He created those people with those kind of passions for a reason. You know, there's a reason why people say, God, why can't I just move past this grief? Well, bitch, I got 415 billion grief counselors that I created for you. That's what the fuck their job is doing. I got that. You know what I'm saying?
I don't think you would say with all them experts.
I mean, but like, you know what I mean? Like, it's like, you know, I'm pretty sure he's like, listen, I created these people for a reason. These people, if you really believe in God and you believe in Christianity, you believe in whatever, God is perfect. And so that means that he's created people in this life for a perfect reason. And sometimes that reason is to make people to help heal you. And it's like, I can't go driving and be like, God, take the wheel, and then I'm not going to die. Like, that's not how that works. God created the person who made the car, and the car has safety features that make sure that I'm able to stay on the road and do stuff like that. So there are different levels to it. And I think people oftentimes get trapped up in that idea that therapy or that praying is enough. That praying is enough. And I think that, yes, praying can be an assist. It can be definitely a great assist. It can definitely be a great comfort. And yes, God can, if you believe in God and that's your whole thing, God can bring you comfort. But unfortunately, you know, there is still a level of community that goes into that. And so while God may always, if you believe in God, again, I'm not over here, you know, preaching nothing like that. But if you believe in God and you're, you know, whatever, because I'm not Christian, but if you believe in God and you believe in that connection or whatever the case may be, then you understand that God controls and is able to heal your spirit. But he's not, and though he can heal your mind or your body, he doesn't always do that because that's what other people's jobs are for. And so your spirit will be fine, but your mind is still grieving. Your heart is still grieving. God may be able to feel your spirit, but your heart and mind still need healing. And that comes from seeking out the people necessary. And even if it's not a therapist, but being able to say, hey, Daquon, I want to talk to you about my blah, 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 blah. Or, hey, whoever your family, or somebody in your family or friends being like, hey, listen, I'm going through X, Y, and Z, and I need someone to talk to. And that helps heal your mind. It helps heal your heart. And God got your spirit. You know what I'm saying? And that's how you want to work with that. So I think it's very much so like a give and take, a kind of, you know, mixing of it. It's kind of a connection of all those things that kind of help you get through it. But I don't think there is a lot of space given for people to say, Mom, God is not, praying is not just, it's not enough.
Right. And I also want to think about, you know, specifically in the Black community, like we have to talk about Black death because it is so normalized in our society. So, Andre, do you think that the frequency and publicity of Black death in the media affects how we grieve our own communities?
I think so. I think unequivocally, because I don't know about you, Daquon, oh God, let me get emotional, but like, you know, sometimes, and I feel so bad having to do this, but sometimes when I see those TikToks or Instagram posts, or they're like X, Y, and Z has died because of blink, 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 I just like, I can't. Like, I just skip over it, or I move it, or I just like don't. I just keep going because I'm like, we know it's a problem, and of course, my heart goes out to people who have been lost. Of course it does. But it's just like when you hear it all of the time, every day it feels, it's like enough. You know what I'm saying? Like, enough. I can only take but so much. My heart can only take but so much because I know that there's nothing that I can do that will heal that person. The person's dead. You know what I mean? And it's one of those things where it's like, it makes you feel so powerless because, and of course, that's the reason why me and Daquon do the show, is to try to bring we try to bring Black issues to the forefront and try to process the stuff that we've gone through, because the reality is we know that it's not going to be solved in one episode. We know that's not going to be solved in 1 year, one decade. This is going to take time, so much time. And so when you see Black death in the media populating so much, it just drains you. And I guess, and actually, now that I think about it, maybe that's a reason why so many Black households don't discuss death, because it's everywhere, especially if you're in a neighborhood that's very violent.
Right. I think that's so important. I think that thinking about my neighborhood, I knew a lot of people, you know, who unfortunately died at a young age because of some type of violence.
Yeah.
And it's one of those conversations where death happens so often that it's just like, do I have the space? Do I have the capacity to just like deal with this, to listen to it? Because like you, there are a lot of times when something, happens on my timeline and on social media, I just scroll and scroll and see Black death after Black death after
Yeah,
Black death. And I think that it is important that we, have a space to talk about these issues that cause so much Black death.
of
But at
course.
the same time, there are different ways to do it. There are different ways to just like put out trigger warnings, put out all of these different things to have these conversations. And also just like respecting the person. Like, I think so many times we honor people in death more than we honor them in life. We talk
Exactly.
about people more in death than we do in their life. So it's almost like their life becomes something when they die. And that's
Exactly.
sad to think about, that possibly my life purpose is to die. And it's one of these conversations that I think that it just numbs you because you see death so many different times and you kind of get this pessimistic view. Like, I have gone through some really dark times thinking about death in different ways because I'm just like,
Mm-hmm.
like, I'm an artist. So a lot of times as an artist, you're just like, oh, people are only going to like really fuck with your work after you're dead. And
Ooh,
you kind of think about, if I'm doing all of this in my life, am I doing this to have a legacy for after I'm dead? Or am I doing something for me right now? Am I living for myself in the present, or am I living for my death and hopeful legacy after death?
Daquon, that's a whole nother episode right there. Daquon, that's a whole nother
Right. And we can
episode.
get there, but I think that, it
But I
was
feel you though.
especially
I feel you.
brought up because recently I found out about Bell Hooks passing away. And Bell Hooks is an amazing Black feminist, Black womanist, you know, activist, advocate, just all
Yeah.
of that. And there were so many people that I personally know that I've tried to talk about Bell Hooks with, who did not know who Bell Hooks was. And
Mm-hmm.
then all of a sudden they're like flooding their timeline, and I'm with Bell Hooks and I'm like, you are celebrating a person who's dead,
That
but
you
you
didn't
never
care
knew
about
them
when they
when
were
they were
alive.
alive.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that we just kind of, and I think that's also kind of going back to the question about the publicity and frequency.
Yeah.
We've gotten to a point to where Black death is so numbing that like that's the only time we can, you know, honor Black people.
Exactly. Now, while death in and of itself is not a bad thing, many religious faiths have painted it to be some sort of boogeyman waiting to devour you or the people you love. Now, we kind of touched on this a little bit, but I wanted to ask you more specifically, Daquan, like, do you think that the prominence of Christianity in the Black community affects us or prevents us from having conversations around death?
Absolutely. I think that I'm going to sound like such a Christianity hater or whatever, but I think that, Christianity, the prominence of Christianity in the Black community
Yeah.
does a lot. Like, not saying that Christianity doesn't have positive notes to it, because I think that there has been plenty of times that the Black community has rallied around Christian cultural
Yeah.
centers for progress. But I also think that it does prevent us from doing certain things like talk about death, because it's kind of like this understood that, oh, he lived a good, or they, she, they, whatever, they lived a good life. So, they're in heaven now with God, and all of their pain and stuff goes away. And that's something that's just like, I don't think that's really helpful in processing death. And I think that it's something that is rooted in slavery. When you think about how Christianity was brought to a lot of enslaved people in this country, they kind of gravitated to that idea that, like, you know, all of this suffering that I'm going through now will be over after I'm dead.
Mm-hmm.
And it's carried on and carried on through like the different generations, even to today, where it's just like, yes, they're dead, but they were suffering while they were here, and now they're in a better place. And like, we can move on. And it's like, no, you can't just move on.
Yeah, no, I mean Daquon might not say it, but fuck Christianity, honestly and truly. And I said what I said, and I meant what I said. And it's
With
because like
all of
this
your chest.
with my whole chest, because it's honestly a really oppressive system, and it's been built on it's foundational in white supremacy. So yeah, fuck them. I don't really. I mean, I don't. There are probably some good people in that faith system, but as a whole, it's fucked up. Just like the police system for it's honestly like the equivalency for the police system for me, where it's like I don't fuck with the police because the whole system as a whole is trash. So just like Christian, there are probably a couple of good Christians out there who genuinely are good people, and the foundation of the religion is probably great. I've read about it, that it is beautiful and wonderful, but the Christianity as a system, complete garbage.
Colonial.
But it's complete trash. But I do think that the prominence of it within our community does make it so much it does make it so much more difficult, especially as a gay person. Now, for me personally, it really rocks me a whole nother way, because oftentimes you're told all in your life that you're going to hell if you're Christian. And if you're gay or if you're bi or if you're trans or whatever the case may be, you're going to hell because you're going against God. But when they die, it's, oh, they're in a better place now. Bitch, that's not what you said a couple of weeks ago than when they were alive. You know what I'm saying? So it to me, it's like, it really fosters this kind of like, well, feel better, woo 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 woo, they're okay now. And it's kind of like, no, bitch, like, it's okay to be mad. It's okay to say, I don't give a fuck that they're in a better place now. I want them here with me now. You know what I'm saying? I think that we don't give people enough space. Stop trying to fix people when they're going through grief. Stop trying to fix people with your religion. Somebody died. Hearing that they're in a better place, I don't give a fuck that my grandmama's in heaven or not. I want her here with me because I love her. I want her here right now, but she's not here. So that hurts. You know what I'm saying? And once again, like I said, it's one of those things where people really get into that whole issue of like, oh yeah, they're in a better place. Whoa, 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 they're in a better place. And it's
You're in my
like,
thoughts and prayers.
Yeah, and it's like, fuck all of that. Like, I don't give a fuck where you think she is or if she's in some whatever the case. I don't give a fuck about none of that. I'm hurt because my grandmother passed away or my partner or whatever has passed away. They are dead right now. I am hurting and I want them here with me. Fuck all of the shit that happens after because I'm not there. I'm here right now in the present. So I think that while I think the intention behind it is to try to find some healing, I do think that people need to give people the space to be in pain and stop trying to fit. Because like I said, that's the shit that really pissed me off, why I got so angry in that moment, because it was just like, like people would tell me all the time, she's in a better place now. It's kind of like, bitch, fuck all of that. I'm hurting. You know what I'm saying? And that, you know what I mean? Am I making sense here? Because I know it's a little bit, a little rough,
no,
but I just
I'm glad you brought that up because while we're on the topic of Christianity, I think we have to talk about Christianity and a lot of religions across the globe just have this, selfless mentality where it's just like, they're going off to a better place and, think about the bigger picture, thinking about your relationship with God and how you can be strong and all of this stuff. And to focus on you and focus on your feelings, it's seen as being too worldly, too selfish. Taking time for yourself is seen as being selfish. And I'm like, excuse me? If I can't be mad that somebody close to me has passed away, I don't want it. Don't get it out my face because I need to focus on me right now. It is not selfish to focus on yourself while you are grieving. It is not selfish to be upset. It is perfectly valid. If you believe in God, God created all of these emotions, so you better feel them.
Exactly. And that's what I keep saying. Like, it used to piss me off so much. But she's in a better place, and she's in a better place. And I'm kind of like, fuck that. I want her here. Yeah, good for her. And yeah, good. That's good and all that. That's, whatever. But I want her here right now. And I think people don't understand is like, that's what you're feeling in those moments. You don't really care. You don't really give a fuck about, oh, they're in heaven and they're at peace and whatever, and all that good stuff. Maybe in a few years, maybe in a few months, maybe depending on how fast you can process or whatever the case may be. But truth be told, most people, we don't give a fuck about where they are right now.
You can't change it.
They're not here. You can't change it. Yeah, we don't, we can't change it, but it's like, we don't give a fuck about them being somewhere else. We want them here. And that's what I think people don't understand about grief is that people are not we are of course subconsciously probably aware that, we hope, if you're religious or whatever, you hope that they're in the next place or the next plane, and they're finally in a better place or at peace or whatever the case may be. You have that, you know what I'm saying, that understanding in your mind. But like I said, in the moment, don't go around just being like, well, she's not suffering anymore, she's at peace. And it's like, while again, I appreciate the sentiment as well, and sentiment is nice and cute, but the actual truth is, I'm hurt because this person is gone, and I'm angry that they're not here. And while I am happy that they are no longer suffering, and I'm grateful for that fact, I still wish they were here with me right now.
Yeah, and I also want to bring up something that you said before, of just like, especially being Black and gay. I
Yeah.
think that intersectionality is important to this conversation, because
Mm-hmm.
when you have so many different compounded oppressions, you're not afforded the opportunity to grieve at all. Like, we have to think about, especially like Black gay people during the AIDS epidemic. Like, if people are dying left and right, your friend is here one day and the next day they're gone, and the next day somebody else is gone. You don't have the time to grieve all of those people. Even in our contemporary time, when we think about, if you are Black and you are working class, so you are considered an essential worker, and you have to go out every single day despite cases rising of COVID, and you see people getting COVID and people having, losing their life or having life altering disabilities, you aren't afforded the opportunity to grieve, because you can afford to take off work. You can afford to quit your job and go to a
Exactly.
job where you can be remote. You got to work that job that you have right then. And so when you have all of these compounded oppressions, it just impacts your ability to grieve even more.
Exactly. Like, that's why I say, like, it's just one of those things where it's like, we are so focused on trying to heal someone and say feel better, that we're not, when people die in my life, when people have died in my friends' lives, or the case may be, I'm always like, if there's anything I say that the great adage, like, if you need anything from me, I'm a listening ear. If you need me, whatever, I'm here for you. If you don't need me to talk about it at all, I don't. I don't bring it up unless they want to bring it up. You see what I'm saying? And I think people need to get
Right.
into that kind of mindset of just letting people have that space. And like, of course, like I said, I'm not like, and I want to clarify what I mean. Like, I'm not saying that because I did come off a little rough when I said it, but like, it's not that I don't care that my grandmother's in a better place, that she's at peace or whatever the case may be. But I do think that there is a nuance to letting people, just let people have that pain and say, you know what, this person is dead, and I'm angry that they're dead, and I want to sit in that for a second. Now, I'm not saying that eventually, like there's a 12-step program, there's grief processes. And so the first part is anger. I don't want to hear about where the fuck they are right now. I'm mad that they're not here. You see what I'm saying? I don't want to give. I don't care about the end resolution right now. I'm focused on the pain that I'm feeling right now, because this person has just died. And so, like I said, when it comes to my friends, if anybody tells me that somebody close to them has died, I'm always, like I said before, hey, I'm a listening ear. If you need me, or if you don't need me, if whatever, I'm here. But I'm not someone who's gonna be like, every time you come on the phone, so how are you doing? How are you?
Right.
How are you feeling?
How are
It's kind of like,
you?
sometimes the best thing you can do for someone who's lost someone is to pretend like, not pretend, but to go back to normalcy, if that makes any sense. Because sometimes somebody is probably struggling so hard to just keep it together when someone has died. The last thing they want to do is that every time they get in a conversation or call with you, it's like, oh,
How are you doing? I know this time is so rough. I just
yeah,
want
and
to check in.
it's like, bitch, no. Like, you know what I'm saying? Like, that just, it honestly baffles me at how people think that those words mean anything to somebody who's lost someone at the time. You know what I'm saying? Again, the sentiment is I know the sentiment comes from a pure place. But like I said, sometimes when someone calls you after they've lost somebody, they've already told you about it, and they've already done what they do, and they haven't called you, whatever the case may be. Sometimes they're like, they just want to talk to you because they know that if I call Daquon, I'll feel better right now, because Daquon will talk about somebody here, somebody this, so I can escape from this pain just for a moment. And sometimes people need that space to grieve in their own pace. And I think I always say this right here: I don't bring it up unless they bring it up to me. That's
Ooh,
the way that I process that, is that like if someone has died, I'm like, oh, I'm sorry to hear that. And and I'm like, if they go any further than that, we can talk about it. If they don't, and I can obviously tell that they just want to tell me this, so I knew. It's like, okay, let's move forward, because obviously you're not in the space to want to discuss that with me, or you don't want to hear it, right? You don't want to bring it up right now. And when you
right.
feel the time to do that, we will. So I think that there's just a lot of nuance that people don't understand about saying, all right, I'm going through X, Y, and Z, and this is hard. And I don't need you to tell me how hard it is, because I already know.
Exactly. And I've gotten into like the, habit of, having that conversation with people. If they call me with bad news, I'm like, do you want to talk about it? If they want to
Exactly.
talk about it, like, what do you want from me in this moment? How can I best
Exactly.
help you? Do you just want somebody to listen? Do you want
Mm-hmm.
somebody to give you some advice? Do you want
Mm-hmm.
somebody to, validate your feelings? Like, what do you need in this moment? And I think going back to our conversation before, not having conversations about death also means that we are not then able to comfort people after they deal with death. It is one of those
Exactly.
things where since we don't talk about death, we can't have this conversation where I find out, oh, Quaviondre, oh, she doesn't want you to comfort her in all of these different types of ways. Like, you need to be able to have that conversation with somebody. And that's why it's so important to talk about people other than your family. Talk about it with your friends. Ask them, hey, if you're dealing with grief, what do you want from me? And what do you think is best for you?
Exactly. Exactly. And that's sometimes all people want to do is to say, hey, how do you want me to help you right now? And it's like, well, I don't want to talk about it. Period. Let's move on. Don't fight somebody about, well, we need to get to it. Bitch, I don't want to talk to you. Anyway,
Right. Everybody is different. Everybody processes things in different times and
and
in
in
different
different
paces.
ways.
Just
Yeah.
because you can talk about it immediately
Ad
doesn't mean that
nauseum. Yeah.
somebody else can.
And I think that that's also that level of like just nuance of knowing, like, at the end of the day, some people don't want to talk about that pain so much so at that present moment, and understanding that, okay, listen, even though and even if you, and this goes the same way with people who are in the same relationship, like if you have someone who's like a brother or sister, whatever, and y'all both grieve, it's kind of like, understand that that person is not going to, maybe that person doesn't want to talk about losing their mom right now. Maybe they don't want to talk about losing the same mom that y'all, or the same father you lost. Sometimes people be like, listen, hey, I just want to breathe right now. I just want to breathe. And I know that you need somebody. You might need to talk to somebody else right now, because I can't have that. Also, that's boundaries. That's another episode. That's another episode right there.
Now, the table is always hot with current events and social issues, but sometimes the heat can get a little intense. Let's turn the temp down, take a breather, and get into this week's topic cool down. So, Quaviondre, what question do you have for us?
Well, I wanted to ask you, Daquon, do you ever want to meet your heroes or celebrities that you look up to?
Yes and no. I there is a part of me that wants to, because there's a lot of people that I look up to that if I get to that point to where they can recognize me, I would feel like, oh, I am doing something with my work, because I see their work ethic. I see the influences that they have in like the industries that I'm most interested in being at, in their creativity and their art, that I want them to see me in that same level, or at any capacity at all. But also, I don't want to get too close. I don't want to get too close to my heroes, because when you're that close, you can see the closet, you can see things come out of the
Mm-hmm.
closet. And I think that once that level of, celebrity or heroism, starts to unravel, then you have honestly a breakdown of like, I've been looking up to this person my entire life and now they're just a shitty person. Like, how can I deal with that?
Yeah, for me, absolutely not. Under the only, if I worked with some, because I'm an actor, I'm a writer, stuff like that, or whatever case may be, and if I had to, if I was ever in that position, which hopefully I will be one day, period, speaking that to existence.
You
But
will
if
be.
I period. But when I'm in that space, or whenever I get in that space to where I'm in around people that I have looked up to, I think that there is something to be said about making sure that you keep that boundary in place about Because I think that what we're missing sometimes is that when you talk to people like heroes and celebrities that you look up to, and you think about the nuance of the fact that they don't owe you a good experience.
Not at all.
They don't owe you a hug or a, you know, high five or even a good, they don't even owe you an acknowledgement. You know what I'm saying? And I think people really mess that up a lot. I remember looking at other celebrities. I think we talked about this a little bit before, but like, you know, just seeing celebrities and seeing how people are like hugging them. And I'm kind of like, I had to kind of, at first, you know, growing up, I was like, why the fuck are these celebrities so mean to their fans? Like, what's wrong? Like, why are they like this? And then I thought to myself and put myself in that position. I was like, let's say I was working at my regular job, like I am, and I'm doing my job and I'm doing a really good, I do really good, you know, work at my job because it's my job. I'm trying to make these money and make my bill and pay my bills. But imagine if somebody like a customer or a patron comes into your establishment and is like, oh my God, it's Daquon. Oh my God, it's Andre. You're the best cashier I've ever seen. You just do this and it's so amazing. I've watched your work for so long. I just love how you count the money. I love how you just press the buttons. And you're like, thanks, I guess. And then like,
Right.
oh, can I get a hug, please? It's kind of like, no, stranger, I don't want you to touch me. And like, I didn't realize, like I said, growing up, I thought about it and I was like, growing up, I thought like, that's such bullshit. Why don't you hug somebody? And I'm kind of like, now that I think about it as an adult, even though it's their career and they love to do what they do, it's still their job.
Right.
It's fully still their job. So people don't really get that, like, they don't owe you a good time. They don't owe you a hug or a, oh my goodness, I thank you so much. I really appreciate your work, taking in my work. It's kind of like, no, once you bought their music, the transaction is complete.
Right. When it comes to celebrities, let's bring it back. Appreciate from a distance. Like, because, you know, Andre and I went to a Beyonce concert, and yes. I will say that is the closest I ever need to be to Beyonce. That is the closest I ever need to be, you know, to Beyonce. Like, I was, you know, we were up there, but that's all I need. I don't need to be any closer, because once that like thing starts unraveling and I see different sides, it won't be the same.
Exactly. I think there's even that kind of nuance there when it's talking about people who like you look up to and you realize that like they come off of a pedestal that you put in your mind. You know what I mean? Because in your mind, they are these amazing supernatural entities. But then you realize, like, for me, that concert, again, Beyonce is that bitch. She is that one. She is the moment. I mean, come on now. But I will say that going to that concert and seeing her in person, it was like, oh, she's just a regular person. Like, she's just a really talented person, but she's just a human being like anybody else. And it was the first time I realized, I was like, oh no, like, it takes away from the magic a little bit.
Right.
You know what I mean? And for me, it's like, I always say that when it comes to meeting people that I look up to, it's like, you know, I'm never going to seek that person out. Like, people like, I'm a big fan of Charmed or whatever the case may be, but like, you know, a lot of these other shows, but it's kind of like, I will never be able to meet the characters. I'm only going to meet the actors. They're not the same people. You know what I mean? I think that's what people get messed up on, is like, you want to meet Beyonce the entertainer. You don't want to meet Beyonce the person. There's a difference. You know what I'm saying? A lot of people don't understand that. It's kind of like they expect Beyonce to be like, you know, and that's Sasha Fierce. It's a whole nother, that's not how she is all the time. That's an aspect of her personality. And I think many people forget that, is that like what you're watching of a person usually is an aspect of who they are. It is not the essence of who they are. And so while it's more of like you pouring a glass of a gallon of milk of that person, and you're like, this milk is delicious. But then you realize there's a whole ass other thing full of other stuff. And you're like, oh, wait a minute. I don't want to drink all of this. I just want to drink this part. And it's like, no, when you meet a celebrity, you meet the whole glass. The glass is overflowing. So I think that while meeting a celebrity is a wonderful thing, and it can be like, and meeting your heroes can be a great experience. I would say it's not something that I particularly want to seek out. You know what I mean? Like, if I happen to be in that space, that's different. But, you know, I think that meeting them, like trying to go out to like the fan cons, fan conventions, like what Daquon said, if we're on the same level, that's fine. Like if I'm your director or we're like acting in the same scene or whatever the case may be, that's different. But if I'm coming to like a con or some kind and I'm like, hey, blah blah blah, I've watched you from the beginning, like, oh, okay, have a good day.
There you go. Get out
Yeah,
my face.
exactly. Exactly. Now, so many children grow up never knowing the full scope of what their culture has contributed to society and history. So it's time for a change. Let's take a pause, rewind, and remind the world just how we did that. Now, in the article 29 Facts About Black History That You Might Not Know, we learn that Dr. Mamie Clayton founded the Mamie A. Clayton Library and Museum in 1975. Home to Mamie Agnew Collection of African American History and Culture, the MCLM contains millions of books, films, documents, artifacts, and art pieces, which are products of Black contributions to the United States. The museum was first started as the Western States Black Research Center, and Dr. Clayton spent decades curating her historical collection on her own. Now, set up in a large garage within Clayton's Los Angeles home, the collection was a library open to all. Now, after some of the artifacts were damaged due to poor storage conditions, a campaign to rescue and relocate Dr. Clayton's work has finally paid off when the collection found its permanent home inside the former Los Angeles County Superior Courthouse in Culver City. It remains open for guided tours in this day. Today.
Gotta love that. Like, as a Black academic, I love museums and archives. I love being able to like go in there and like touch different materials and like see original documents. So gotta love an archivist, especially a Black archivist.
Period.
Now, Fanny Jackson Cobbin was born into slavery, but at the age of 12, her aunt was able to buy Cobbin's freedom. She attended Oberlin College, becoming the second Black woman ever to receive a bachelor's degree. Following graduation, she decided to go into teaching and became a teacher at the Institute for Colored Youth. She then became principal of the school, making her the first Black woman to be a school principal. Cobbin was a staunch advocate for increasing the educational opportunities and achievements of Black people, stating in a letter to Frederick Douglass, I quote, "I feel sometimes like a person to whom in childhood was entrusted some sacred flame. This is the desire to see my race lifted out of the mire of ignorance, weakness, and degradation. No longer sit in obscure corners and devour the scraps of knowledge which his superiors flung at him. I want to see him crowned with strength and dignity, adorned with the enduring grace of intellectual attainments," end quote. She later went on to become the first Black school superintendent, period. And Cobbin State University, an HBCU in Baltimore, was named in her honor.
I mean, once again, Black women.
At this point, we don't even have to say it. We just know.
Constantly raising the bar. That's amazing. That really is. Now, as always, thank you all so much for watching, and keep the conversation going down in the comment box below. Don't forget to give this video a thumbs up if you're listening to us on our podcast. Now, please remember to rate and review on whatever podcast platforming that you're using. Now, if you want to follow us on social media, our handles are at Andre Talks a Lot and at Daquon950. You can also follow our podcast on Instagram at The Melanin Margin for updates of new content. Now, we will see you all next week on The Melanin Margin, where conversations about race are never off the table.